Now, you guys, the case of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell is one that is very strange but very complex. Multiple people lost their lives at the hands of these two people, and it seems like even years later, they have no remorse and no regret about the devastation they caused on their own families. So, y'all, this is part one of the crazy story of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. So, let's start off with Lori. Now, in the early 2000s, Lori married a man by the name of Joseph Ryan. Prior to her marriage with Joseph, Lori already had an older son by the name of Kobe. And in 2002, Lori and Joseph Ryan would welcome their only child together, Tylee. Now, this would have been Lori's third marriage. Lori is saying that Joseph Ryan was very abusive, and there were even allegations that he assaulted her older son, Kobe. Now, this eventually led to their divorce. And in 2012, she would marry another man by the name of Charles Vallow. Now, although Charles and Lori, they don't have any biological children together, one of Charles's family members was suffering with substance abuse, and they had a child by the name of JJ. So in order to help this family member out, Lori and Charles ended up adopting Charles's nephew. Now, by this time, Kobe, he's grown, he's out of the house. So in the house is Lori, Charles, JJ, which is the adopted child, and Tylee, which is the child that Lori shared with her other husband. Now, everything seemed to be going good in their marriage up until around 2015, when Lori started to read these series of books that were written by a man by the name of Chad Daybell. So Chad had these books that he would write, and the books were about doomsday. So Chad had like this cult-like following, and he would host events. And y'all, Lori starts to go to these events. Now, people that were at these events would say that Lori and Chad would act very flirtatious, even though Lori was still married to Charles, and Chad was married to a woman by the name of Tammy Daybell. Now, it got to a point where Lori would start holding events at her home when Charles would go out of town. And she would even invite Chad to her home without telling Charles. So y'all, Lori and Chad, they started to get so close to the point where they would tell people that they were married in a past life. Not only that, y'all, they started to get extremely obsessed with life and death, and they started to categorize people as light and dark. So basically, a light person in their eyes was a person that was good, and a dark person in their eyes was a person that was evil and had demonic spirits inside of them. Now, y'all, it got to a point where they would start holding these meetings, and at these meetings, they would cast away the evil spirits. Now, Lori is still married to Charles at this point, but Charles is starting to notice a very drastic change in Lori's behavior. And he starts to notice that Lori is leaving for long periods at a time, and he just thinks that something is going on. Now, y'all, in the midst of all of this going on, her previous husband, Joseph Ryan, he suddenly passes away. And this will be the first suspicious death of many in this whole case. So Charles, he starts to confront Lori about things that she's doing and how she's changing. And in return, Lori starts to threaten Charles. This is when Lori tells Charles that he is possessed by demonic spirits and she no longer wants to be with him. So Charles, he decides to file for divorce. Now, after he files for divorce, Lori, she ups and leaves for over a month, and he has no idea where she is. Lori even went so far as to taking $35,000 out of their joint account. And at this time, Charles had $1 million life insurance, and when she started moving shady, he changed his beneficiary. Now, he changed his beneficiary to his sister, but he didn't tell Lori. And that's when Charles started to do his own investigation into what Lori had going on. And that's when he finds out about Chad. He finds out that Chad is married as well to Tammy. So Charles is like, look, I'm going to find Tammy and I'm going to talk to Tammy. And y'all, from what we know, Charles did try to reach out to Tammy, but we don't know what came of that whole conversation. And by July of 2019, Lori is out of the home, but Chad and Tammy, they are still together. They're still living together and they're still married. On July 11th of 2019, Charles is on his way to Lori's new home in order to pick up the kids. Because by this time, you guys, they're separated, like I said before. So the kids, they spend time with Lori and they spend time with Charles. So Charles, he goes to her home, but once he gets there, he's confronted by Lori's brother, Alex. So there are different versions of events about what actually took place on this day. But from what Lori is saying, Charles came to her home with a bat. He threatened her with a bat. He threatened her brother with a bat. And he threatened the kids, which I don't believe. Now, it got to a point where the brother had to come out of the room and basically confront Charles. And in doing so, an altercation occurred and Charles ends up dead. Now, y'all, let me stop the story and say this. I 100% believe that Alex was there in order to confront Charles. I think that they confronted Charles and Charles was defending himself. Listen to what Lori said in her interview.
Okay. So it wasn't a good idea for Charlie to get out of the house.
Probably not the.
I mean, he played semi-pro when he was young. But, yeah, and then I was kind of turned around, and we were all right there in that room, except for the kids had been outside by that time, and I heard the gunshot.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you heard the shot?
Mm-hmm.
Did you actually see the shot, or did you just hear it?
I had gone around to the kitchen to get away from him, and so back around. So I don't know if he went in the house.
I didn't. So I'm.
So Charles, he's unalived by Lori's brother Alex. The police, they come out, they do an investigation. And from what Lori is saying, what Alex is saying, and from what the kids are saying, they deem this self-defense and they do not charge Alex with anything. So if you're doing the math, that is now 2 husbands of Lori Vallow that are now deceased. So now Lori and JJ, which is Charles's nephew, remember, this is not Lori's family member, this is Charles's family member that they adopted. And Tylee and Lori's brother Alex, they all up and moved to Idaho. But before moving to Idaho, Lori, she puts all of the kids' things in storage. Now, JJ has autism, and strangely, she sells JJ's service dog right before they move. Now, y'all, this move to Idaho would set off a string of events that would later make national news.